Hey guys, welcome back. So now we're jumping right back into Avengers Forever. And it's here where we're going to see if the Black Skull, who loves to torture his prisoners, can actually break the Ghost Rider, Robbie Reyes, with the Black Skull wanting to know everything that's in that little flaming skull of his. So with that said, let's get into it. But first, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so for this one, we pick back up with Robbie Reyes and the Deathlock, who we had recently seen attempt to be heroes and save some wastelanders in a hopeless world, only to soon after get stopped in their tracks by this world's waste lord, the Black Skull, who had then shortly after taken in the two of them as his prisoners. But also recently, we're given a bit of insight from Earth 818's Tony Stark on what it's like to be a prisoner of the Waste Lord, who's someone we've actually known about for some time now as the Black Skull, who is an alternate version of the Red Skull with the Venom Symbiote, who we originally seen back in Heroes Reborn. But it's here on Earth 818 where we were told by Tony Stark that the Black Skull likes to take prisoners, and he loves torturing them, whether it's to get answers or to get them to do what he wants them to do. And it's when we jump back in here, we find that the Black Skull has taken both Robbie Reyes and the Deathlock to his main compound, while keeping Robbie's charger chained up in the dungeon. But while they're here, we find that the Black Skull has given a lot of his attention to Robbie, because the Black Skull wants to know who Robbie is and where he came from, since the Avengers of this world are supposed to be long gone. And with this interrogation, it gets pretty crazy, because the Black Skull cuts off Robbie's right foot, which is the foot that he uses to stand up in the pedal and bust the dashboard. But even with the Black Skull going to this extreme, Robbie doesn't tell him anything. But also, while we're here talking about skulls and dungeons, I want to take a moment and tell you guys about this video's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends, which is one of the biggest turn-based MMORPGs out right now, with it now having close to 700 champions, as well as over a dozen factions to choose from, like the Shadowkin, who fight to restore their lost honor. And on top of that, there's a ton of gameplay styles that you can jump into, whether you like boss matches, PvP arena matches, dungeon runs, you name it. And for a limited time, for all new and existing raid players, you now have the opportunity to enter the Champions Elect event to vote for your favorite starter champion. And all you have to do to enter is head to championselect.polarium.com, enter your ID, and then vote for your favorite champion. It's very simple and straightforward, but make sure you enter between January 16th and February 10th for the opportunity to win some pretty insane in-game and real-life prizes, which include rare, epic, and legendary champions, as well as the chance to win an Amazon gift card for up to $1,000. And in addition, for new and existing players, Raid has added MMA and pro wrestling legend Ronda Rousey to their roster as a legendary champion that you can get for free right now. And all you gotta do is log in and play Raid Shadow Legends for 7 days between now and February 20th to unlock her character, so don't miss out. And if you're completely new to Raid Shadow Legends, you can use my link in the description or my QR code and get free epic champion Jotun, as well as bonuses worth up to $35 in value, which include 100 silver, 50 gems, and 2 epic skill tomes, which will all be waiting for you in your inbox. So make sure and hop into Raid Shadow Legends while these offers last. But when the Black Skull takes Robbie's foot and he tosses it to one of his guys, telling him to fly it into the sun, Robbie's foot burns through this guy's soul. And as soon as this happens, Robbie takes the opportunity to attempt to escape, only for the Black Skull to crush the hopes of that even happening. But also with doing this, the Black Skull lets Robbie in on a few things, because much like the Ghost Rider in his charger, he's familiar to bonding himself with a power so great that he nearly loses himself in the process. And for the Black Skull, burning his soul with penance is useless, because he believes everything that he's done, even to the extreme of genocide, has all been for a righteous cause. And so there's no guilt, regret, or remorse in his hardened soul. Unlike Robbie's soul, who he says is still a bit mushy. And with the Black Skull asking Robbie again, who sent him throughout the multiverse? In response, Robbie just spits in his face one sizzling hot loogie, which right there just earns Robbie even more torture at the hands of the Black Skull, the big brawly spiky hands at that. But even still, much like earlier, Robbie refuses to make a sound, even with all the pain and agony that he's in, because he refuses to give the Black Skull the pleasure. But with Robbie doing this, it only keeps him in a daily cycle of getting tortured and getting thrown back in his cell with the Deathlock, only to do it all over again the next day. But with this Deathlock, who was sent from Avengers Prime to protect the remaining Avengers, which as we've seen with the other Deathlocks, they're not doing too good of a job. But it's here where he tries to encourage Robbie, more or less by letting him know that 1, he can't fall asleep, because if Robbie does, he'll turn back to his human form, and in this mutilated condition, if he reverts back, he won't last long. And the Deathlock goes on to let Robbie know that he's traveled the multiverse and he's seen more worlds than there are roaches on this floor. And he knows that Robbie Reyes isn't like any other Ghost Rider that he's ever seen before. So Robbie has got to do his best to hold out by staying in his Ghost Rider form to prevent succumbing to these mortal wounds, while also not losing his identity from being in his Ghost Rider form for too long. Not to mention enduring these hours of daily torture, which at this point for Robbie, it's been over a week. But the next day, while he's being tortured by the Black Skull, Robbie ends up giving him that scream that he's been asking for. But with doing so, like the Black Skull had mentioned, this didn't get Robbie too far, because eventually a ton of war machines showed up. Robbie ended up toasting them and just getting thrown back in his cell, only to then get back to the torture the next day. But this particular day, the Black Skull had noticed that this Ghost Rider was being extremely quiet, as if he was focusing on something. And for the Black Skull, this piqued his interest because he wanted to know what's going on in this Ghost Rider's head, in hopes that he would share it from one skull to another. But quickly we come to find that the reason why Robbie was concentrating, it was because he was driving. And right then his charger just breaks free from the chains in the lower dungeon, driving up the walls and nearly making its way to Robbie. But this plan then gets canned when the Ghost Goblin shows up, who's your alternate universe Green Goblin Ghost Rider, and he just helps the Black Skull get things back under control. But it's here where the Black Skull and the Ghost Goblin have a conversation where they mention that they've never seen a rider like this before. And Ghost Goblin mentions that he's seen plenty on motorbikes, some on horses, and even one on a shark at one point. But the thing that has the Ghost Goblin the most curious about Robbie is that he doesn't smell the stench of Mephisto on him, which for Robbie, this is one of those things that goes back to how he became a Ghost Rider in the first place. Cause aside from us seeing Robbie possess a dead celestial, one of the things that's arguably more unique about him is his origin and his unique connection to the spirit of vengeance, which he has by way of his estranged uncle, serial killer Eli Morrow, rather than it being a deal with Mephisto, which in that case would have given him the power from Zarathos, which makes him super unique without being tied to someone super powerful like Zarathos, like Johnny Blaze or Alejandro Jones. And he's still different from Danny Ketch, who got his abilities from the powerful Noble Kale. And I mean, this difference for Robbie, it may be something important down the line that connects to him being the multiversal Ghost Rider, since the Masters of Evil are in cahoots with Mephisto. But only time will tell. But also, while Robbie's here, he hears the Ghost Goblin's bag of skull bombs, which were made from skulls of Ghost Riders from across the multiverse, calling him the All Rider, while also saying, "All hail the All Rider." But it's next when we then see Robbie taken back to his cell with the Deathlock, where we find that the Deathlock has been helping him out by reminding him that he's Robbie Reyes and telling him about his human self, while also reminding Robbie about his little brother Gabe back home, who Robbie loves more than anything. And with the Deathlock doing this for Robbie, little does he know that these roaches are getting the word back to the Black Skull. So after this, when we then go back to your next day of regular scheduled torture, which seems like it just goes on, it's here where we find that Robbie has been instructed to make his way to a specific room, which has a lot of screaming behind the door. But when he makes his way inside, he finds a countless number of alternate universe versions of himself who have pretty much turned on each other after months of near starvation and torture. And as Robbie makes his way through this room with his prosthetic chain foot of vengeance, his multiversal counterparts pause for a moment, but then they just go back to killing each other. Because the Black Skull told him that all they have to do to go home is be their last Robbie standing. And through the course of this, the Black Skull is just taunting Robbie, telling him how in every other universe he's visited, the Robbie Reyes on each Earth, they would either be tragically insignificant or just right out non-existent. And for Robbie, this whole experience is terrifying, with him hearing his own voice scream in pain while being murdered by himself in every corner of this room, and the fear just causes him to freeze for a moment. But then with him thinking of how he can stop all these versions of himself without hurting them, and he looks in their eyes and he sees his own fear, along with a desperation and madness that he had never seen before. And Robbie tells himself that under no circumstances, regardless of what the Black Skull has said, he's never gonna allow himself to do these things, not even to himself. But as he tries to keep telling himself that over and over in his own head, trying to drown out all of their screams, and it isn't long before Robbie realizes that now he's the only person screaming. Which from here, Robbie admits that he's broken. He's finally past that point, though he hasn't specifically said those words, out loud at least. Cause it's here when he's thrown back in his cell with the Deathlock, and the Deathlock just looks at him and says that the Black Skull finally did it. He finally broke you. But for Robbie, he just thinks to himself like, no, I did it to myself. But it's here with the Deathlock just doing what he can to help Robbie hold on, since Robbie Reyes is the All-Rider, and at this point he's the only Avenger that this world really has, as far as they know. But then more of these bugs make their way into the room, and as the Deathlock tries to smash them, amongst these bugs a voice says, "Hey, watch it, pal." And it's here where they find that Tony Stark, the Ant-Man of Earth 818, has made his way here to rescue the two of them, only for Robbie to then respond that he does not want to be rescued. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.